Now we're in part 2 of the second episode of the Bookings Forecast series, and we're establishing the foundation, the data quality and the deal qualification foundation. In the last episode, as you recall, we talked about why booking forecasts are usually wrong, but this week, let's talk about the foundation you need to fix it. You address the data quality and the deal qualification standards, and here's the truth. You cannot forecast accurately if your pipeline data is garbage. And I've observed that most companies have terrible pipeline data. Not because people are malicious, that's not the intent, but because there is no discipline, no standards, and no consequences for sloppy data entry. Let me paint a picture of what bad data might look like. I was working with a company where I pulled up 20 deals from their commit forecast, 20 deals. And these were deals the CRO was telling the board would close this quarter. But you know what I found? Well, deal one, amount was $250,000, but when I asked a rep about it at the field level, he said, could be anywhere from $150,000 to $400,000, depends on what they want to buy. Now, that's not a forecast, that's a range the size of California. There's deal two, the close date was the end of this month. Last activity logged in Salesforce was 3 weeks ago. And the last note said, waiting to hear back. Nobody had even talked to the customer in 3 weeks, but it was in the commit forecast. Deal three, the state said it was in the negotiation stage, but when you start digging into the notes, they had not even done a demo yet. The negotiation was a rep trying to get a meeting scheduled. This happened over and over and over. So the pipeline was full of deals, replete with deals that looked real on paper but fell apart under any scrutiny. And this company was trying to forecast bookings of this data? Good luck. It was impossible. So let's talk about what good data hygiene looks like, because this is the foundation everything else is built on. The first criteria is required. All the required fields must actually be required. Most CRMs have required fields, but I've observed companies where reps just put garbage in to get past the requirement. TBD in the next step field, random dates picked out of thin air for close dates. You need required fields, but you also need someone checking that those fields contain meaningful information. I've observed companies implement what I call a pipeline inspection checklist. Before a deal can move to certain stages, particularly before it enters your forecast, someone has to verify that the specific information is documented. Who is the economic buyer? And then, when did we last speak with them? Now, what is a compelling event driving this purchase? What is our documented next step, our next strategy, and when is it scheduled? Who are the competitors? What is the competition, and why are we positioned to win? And how do we position to win? This isn't bureaucracy, it's basic qualification process in action. If you can't answer these simple questions, the deal is not real enough to forecast. Second, look at the close dates, and they have to be based on something real. This is where I see the most fantasy in pipelines. Reps set close dates, based on when they want or need the deal to close, not based on the customer's actual buying process. And here's what I've observed that works. Close dates should be tied to specific milestone events. When is the customer's next board meeting where they will approve this purchase? When does their budget year start? When is the contract renewal they are going to replace? These are real dates that matter. Everything else is wishful thinking. I have worked with a company that implemented a very simple rule. You cannot forecast a close date unless you can document the specific event that will trigger the customer's decision. This one minor change, it improved the forecast accuracy by about 20%, 15-20% in one quarter. Why? Because it forced reps to actually understand the customer's buying process instead of guessing. There's a third element. Deal amounts, they need to be validated. I've observed reps inflate deal sizes for all sorts of reasons. Sometimes it's optimism. Sometimes they're trying to hit a quota threshold. Sometimes they generally don't know and they're guessing very high. Whatever the reason, inaccurate deal amounts destroy your forecast. You think you're going to do $5 million and it turns out you end up doing $2 million, okay? So you have overvalued your forecast significantly. So what's the solution? The deal amount should be tied to specific products and quantities at documented prices, not ballpark estimates. If you don't know exactly what the customer is buying and what they'll pay for, the deal is not far enough along to have a reliable amount. So let's talk about the qualification standards then, because this is just as important as data quality. I've observed that most companies, they have some kind of qualification framework. You call it BANT, MEDIC, whatever. That's fine. The problem isn't that they don't have a method. The problem is nobody actually uses it consistently. Consistently is the operative word. Every rep qualifies differently. Every manager has their own interpretation. You cannot build an accurate forecast when qualified means something different to every person. Here's a personal experience. I was working with a company that used Medic. In theory, that was a great method, but when I interviewed the sales team or a couple of field salespeople, I got wildly different interpretations of what each letter meant. Metrics to one rep meant the customer had complained about the current solution. Metrics to another rep meant that they had documented specific financial impact with numbers. These are not the same thing. We spent a week standardizing this qualification criteria. We wrote down specifically what each element meant and what evidence you needed to prove we had satisfied it. We created examples of good qualification and bad qualification. We trained everyone on the standards. And critically, we made managers responsible for enforcing those standards in every pipeline review. So what was the result of all of this? The deals that would have previously entered the pipeline got sent back for more qualification work. The pipeline got smaller, thinner in the short term, which scared the CRO, but the quality of the pipeline improved dramatically. And 3 months later, the forecast accuracy had improved by 18 percentage points because they were only forecasting deals that were actually qualified. So let me give you the minimum qualification standard. I recommend before any deal enters your forecast, you might want to look into that. Number one, you have spoken with the economic buyer, someone who can actually approve the purchase in the last 2 weeks. 2, you have documented a compelling event, a specific reason this customer needs to make a decision by the forecasted close date. And 3, you have documented the decision process. Who is involved? What steps remain when those steps will happen? There's a 4th element that kicks into gear. You have identified competition and documented why you are positioned to win. You have provided specific proposal with documented pricing, and the customer has acknowledged it is within their budget. And if you can check all of these boxes, the deal does not belong in your commit forecast. Maybe it's in your pipeline, maybe it's a working opportunity, but you are not committing to the board that it will close. I know this sounds strict, and I've heard a lot of objections. Oh, fine. We'll miss out on deals if you're too rigid. Our sales cycle does not work that way. This will make our pipeline look too small. But here's what I've observed. Companies that implement strict qualification standards, they actually close more revenue, not less. Why? Because your sales team, they stop wasting time on deals that were never going to close, and they focus their energy on properly qualified opportunities. Your forecast becomes reliable, which means you can make better strategic decisions, and you stop the cycle of disappointment, and you stop the cycle of excuse. Making those disappointment excuse comes from constantly missing your forecast, and that's the foundation. Without clean data and consistent qualification standards, nothing else we talk about in this series will work. You cannot build an accurate forecast on top of bad data and inconsistent qualification. It's like building a house on quicksand. The next episode, we'll talk about the actual forecasting process, how to inspect the pipeline, how to build your forecast, and how to manage it week by week throughout the quarter. But everything we cover in the next episode assumes you've got the foundation in place that we talked about today. So assuming that to be the case, and you have a better understanding of what needs to get done, well, let's move on to part 3, where we talk about the forecasting process in the next episode. See you there. Bye.